In any altar call to join the modern Christian church, this passage is likely to be the first sentence that you hear. There is none righteous, no, not one. By the law, no human being is justified. According to Christianity, you were doomed to this condition from your birth. There is only one way to change your condition. This passage is routinely quoted from the book of Romans as written by the Apostle Paul. Paul was a very good writer for his day. He used a literary construct that is still familiar today. He lays groundwork by citing his proof passages from authoritative sources, and the reader is encouraged to verify these sources. It should exist, it should be quoted accurately, and finally, it should be understood and applied in the context in which it was written. Scholar that he was, Paul often used this familiar construct in his epistles. Paul's application of that construct in Romans 3 created one of the most fundamental, foundational assertions of Christianity. The phrase, as it is written, introduces as authoritative proof text. Though not specifically stated, the source, Tanakh, or Old Testament, is implied. And indeed, the phrases are traceable to that text, as we will soon examine. For Paul, this cited evidence, with a sprinkling of his own logic, leads to the unmistakable conclusion that no human being in history has ever been righteous or justified before God. A handy-dandy Google search quickly locates Paul's sources. The as it is written phrase might have made us expect a single source, but no, Paul dances through some 6 passages spread across Psalms and Isaiah. He extracts phrases from each of these passages. He unites them into one cohesive arrangement of proof text. The fact the wording changes a bit implies that he loosely quoted them from memory. When Paul assembles the fragments, what emerges is a lot of proof texts about them. They are liars. They deceive. They shed innocent blood. They don't fear God. They. But who is they? Well, Paul's conclusion makes it very clear. They is you and me, the entirety of mankind, short of Jesus. Well, let's verify that. Let's build a checklist. Here we have each of our individual sources. You may notice Psalms 53 is missing. Since it is near identical to Psalms 14, we will examine both of them together. Column 2 is key phrases referencing they. Column 3 will be the identity of they, as we find it in the context. Final column is pass-fail. Passages supporting Paul's conclusion get a check mark. Passages that refute it get an X. Simple and easy. So let's look at our first passage in Psalms 14. Here are all the negative things about them. Corrupt, do abominations. There is none of them who does good. No understanding. They've all turned away from the path. But there's something very strange in verse 4. What is this? My people? It would appear they are persecuting my people. How can it be if they represent all of creation? Maybe they is just a subset of creation. Let's zoom out. As we zoom out and we read the passage from the beginning, it all becomes very clear. They, in this passage, speaks of the fool. not just a regular fool, an atheist fool. The atheist fool lacks understanding. The atheist fool is turned aside. There is no atheist fool who does good, no, not one. As another little surprise, one verse further down, this same passage actually acknowledges the existence of a people deemed righteous. Remember, according to Paul's conclusion, these people don't exist. According to Paul, the condemnation was for all peoples of all times. Yet here we see them mentioned specifically in the text that Paul quoted as his authoritative source. Let's update our results. The identity of they in the passage was the atheist fool. The passage was a confrontation between those fools and the righteous. Therefore, it is also proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that certain people, crossing various times in history, are indeed righteous. Strike one. What's next? Similar to last round, we find the block of text that Paul quoted in Romans. Looking slightly above, we find the identity of they, my enemies. In the same exact verse, we find David seeking righteousness. And then down below, we find blessed assurance that the righteous are indeed blessed by God. It's the next verse of the same sad song. They references people who have chosen evil, acting as enemies to God and David, and they are contrasted with the righteous, choosing good. Another miss. You can't say was it consistent. Same pattern. He snatched the text he wanted to use to make his point. He ignored the context of who it was speaking of, and he ignored the contrast in the same passage between the righteous clinging to God and the wicked that were being described so harshly. Result: they refers only to evil men. Another big fail. Mankind indeed includes the righteous. Psalms 10:7. How did Paul study at the feet of Rabbi Gamaliel, as he claims, and walk away thinking it's okay to snatch this as an accusation against all mankind when he knows full well it speaks of atheists? What kind of man would knowingly apply that condemnation to the very people being victimized? Well, it's sort of overwhelming so far. He's misapplied everything. Have we seen one universal condemnation as of yet? Could anyone accidentally get all of these targeted wrong? Let's update and move on. Paul is going to improve a little in Isaiah. As usual, he snatches what he needs, but this time it is slightly more appropriate. God is warning of national punishment because of collective sins. Those doing the iniquity are his chosen people. The accusations go smoothly from your to no one to they, finally referring to multiple individuals in the collective. Still, we see later the glimpses of the same righteous victims we saw in the Psalms, and the story ends with them returning to being righteous. If, quote, no one, end quote, from national Israel was righteous, it is unlikely that anyone else in the world was righteous either. However, this does not represent all mankind across all time. They, in this passage, had fallen from a previous state of righteousness into evil. They were destined to also return to a state of righteousness. Therefore, this passage also fails to support Paul's conclusion. Need I repeat myself? Same story over and over and over. Paul pitched a no-hitter, folks. Nobody else pushes Paul's doctrine. Luke spoke of the parents of John the Baptist. Was he lying when he said that they were righteous? He even said they followed all of the commandments. Was Jesus out of his mind when he said your righteousness is required to enter into the kingdom